Welcome to the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. These podcast episodes with Will and his guests provide you with insights on how you can transform your excuses into results to benefit yourself, your family, your friends, your community, society, humanity, and the universe with what Will calls the ripple effect. Will's mission is to empower 1 billion people via the ripple effect and intends that you'll become another person to add to the count, having listened to this episode.
Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 103, and in this episode I'm joined by Dr. Mark Goulston. Dr. Mark Goulston is originally a UCLA professor of psychiatry for over 25 years and a former FBI and police hostage negotiation trainer. Mark's expertise has been forged and proven in the crucible of real-life high-stakes situations. He's the co-founder of the Michelangelo Mindset, an approach that was nominated for a 2021 Breakthrough Idea Award by Thinkers 50, which is the Oscars of management ideas and thinking. Michelangelo Mindset is the ability to look, as Michelangelo did, with a block of marble into your immediate and longer term future and see success, happiness and fulfillment, and to carve away anything that gets in the way of achieving those. He's considered one of the world's leading experts on empathetic listening and the inventor of surgical empathy. He's the co-author and author of 9 books, including Just Listen, which has been translated into 28 languages and become the top book on listening in the world. Mark is a business psychiatrist, and the business world hires him to overcome any and all people challenges, including fully engaging customers, investors and employees, undivided attention and interest. He also hosts the highly rated podcast My Wake Up Call, which is in the top 1.5% of all podcasts. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Looking forward to it, Will.
You and me both. We've just heard you've got quite the career, and we were just speaking just before we went live about one of the things that you love doing is not being in the weeds and being able to think creatively and develop and grow, and have got this, I suppose, curiosity about you that's led you down some incredible paths and done some incredible things in your life. But I mean, there's not many people you speak to that have spent 25 years as a professor of psychiatry and then also worked in the FBI as a hostage negotiator and done some of these incredible things. So before we really get into some of the phenomenal content and wisdom that you have, I would love for you to just share with the people listening, how has that journey evolved to even doing those roles, and where did that all start from?
Well, I'm going to share an origin story, and I hope it'll be as interesting as it is long, because something fairly dramatic has happened in my life. And recently, I started a company with a partner called Michelangelo Mindset, and it was nominated for a Breakthrough Idea Award by Thinkers 50. And Michelangelo Mindset, if you think about Michelangelo, he had a quote that said, "I saw the angel or the statue of David in the marble, and I kept carving until I set it free." And so what I'm now doing is teaching the world to look at the world through the eyes of Michelangelo and think like him. And why it's been pretty emotionally remarkable for me is part of my backstory is when I went to medical school, I dropped out twice because I had untreated depression. And I dropped out the first time and I went and worked in a blue collar job, and my mind was able to handle that. I did that for a year. I came back and then I restarted again. And then my mind kind of left me. And I met with the head of the school. The head of the school is about funding. And I don't even remember a meeting with him, but he then referred me to the dean of students, who's the head of, who cares about students. And the dean of students said, "I have a letter here from the other dean, you better come in." So I was at a low point, and I come from a background where you're worth what you can do in life. If you can't do much, you're not worth much. That's not an unusual mindset to have. And so I get there at a low point. And I think the head of the school referred me to the dean of students because, he knew that they wanted to kick me out and he didn't want me doing anything self-destructive. So I'm there with the dean of students. He says, read this letter from the head dean. And it said, I met with Mr. Goulston. We talked about another career, and I'm advising the committee, not admissions committee, but I'm advising them that he be asked to withdraw. And so I asked the dean of students, what does this mean? He says, you've been kicked out. And then I kind of cratered in front of him, Will. I bent over, and I'm not religious or spiritual, but I felt something wet on my cheeks, and I thought my eyes were bleeding. And so I kept touching it with my fingers, and I looked at my hands, and it was tears. And this is what he said to me. He said, Mark, you didn't mess up because you're passing everything, but you are messed up. But if you get unmessed up, I think this school would be glad that they gave you a second chance. And so I started to cry from the compassion he was showing. And then he said to me, and even if you don't get unmessed up, even if you don't become a doctor, even if you don't do anything the rest of your life, I'd be proud to know you, because you have a streak of kindness in you and goodness that we don't grade in medical school. We should, but we don't. And you have no idea how much the world needs that. And you won't know it till you're 35, but you got to stay alive till you're 35, and you deserve to be on this planet, and you're going to let me help you. And if he had said, call me if I can help you, I probably would have gone back to my apartment. I probably wouldn't have called him. I probably wouldn't be here today. But he saw something in me that I didn't. He saw a future for me that I didn't. I was trying to dig up why he saw this. Well, during those years, I had written a poem called Lament for the Old that got published, which I believe he read. And at the end of it, it basically said what was missing from the medical treatment of geriatric patients was people to hear their stories, people to lessen their loneliness, and maybe people to give a damn when they died. And I said, and what was also missing was to hear the stories of people 3 times their age to share wisdom. And what's fascinating is I'm 3 times the age now of when I wrote that poem. And so what happened, and this is why, again, I'm getting a little emotional about it. He read that and he saw a future for me that I didn't see. I was the David to the dean of students. He looked into my future that I couldn't see, and he saw this person's going to be able to help people. And so I took a year off, went and worked at a famous psychiatric foundation called the Menninger Foundation. And then I came back, finished medical school, then went into training in psychiatry. And then after that, I was a suicide prevention specialist for 25 years, and none of my patients died by suicide. And I just did with them what the dean of students did with me. And so he saw that ability in me. But it's come full circle when I think I was his David. And so now what I'm doing is I'm going out in the world, and Michelangelo Mindset is a way of looking into the world. And I'm going to give you an experience of it right now. Okay, I'm going to do an exercise with you. And this is how Michelangelo Mindset works. It's to be able to look into your future, your customers, your clients, your investors, your people, the talent you're trying to attract, and you see something in them that's going to cause them to want to have you. And you want to clear away everything that gets in the way of their wanting to have you. So here's the experience I'm going to give you, and you tell me if you feel something different inside you. You ready? So right now you're listening to me. You've given me a long leash, and I appreciate that. And you're following the story. you're listening to me, you're probably thinking of where do we take Mark's story? Where do we move the rest of the interview? And so you're listening to me as I'm telling you the story. But inside you listening to me is you're listening for something. And I think what you're listening for is you have the trust and confidence of your listeners. They're trusting you and having confidence in you to be able to change their life, make them more successful, more happy, more fulfilled. You want to honor that trust. You don't want to let them down. And what you're looking for is guests who can give them information that is immediately relevant to them and their life, that's clear, concise, and doable by them. If you can get guests who deliver information that's relevant to their life, clear, concise, and doable by them, you will feel that you're really honoring their trust and confidence. And I'm guessing you're also listening for best-selling authors who are awful, ones who are just so boring or arrogant or condescending that you're thinking to yourself, I know he or she has a best-selling book, but I don't know if I can post this interview. They're terrible. I have to protect my leaders, my listeners from them. So is any of that accurate that I just said?
Yeah, there's definitely the former that you mentioned for sure. Listening for those relevant, doable actions, those new insights that create a new way of thinking, so then people can go off and do new things. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so you feel that you don't want to waste your listeners' time.
Yeah.
And you appreciate that they're giving you the time, they're taking time out of their life to listen to your podcast.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this is just sort of an example. It's interesting. I'm building a course for an international accelerator, and they have a cohort every 3 months of about 15 to 20 startups, and the startups are all around the world, and because of Zoom, they've been able to, do what they're doing. And so I've created a course called Pitch and Succeed Like Michelangelo. And the idea being is if you're a startup and you're meeting with an investor, inside that investor is someone who wants to give you their money. They wouldn't be meeting with you unless they wanted to give you their money. That's the David and the statue. The key is, how do you carve away everything that would prevent that? And so I'll just give you a taste of it. What investors are looking for is they're not looking for the next best idea, because everybody they meet has the next best idea. What they're looking for is, first of all, it has to be a good enough idea that can be scaled, but they're looking for a team of people that they can trust, that they believe can really pull it off. And they're looking for a team they can have confidence in. So what's the track record of the founder in what he or she has done in their life? Have they ever built anything? Have they ever accomplished anything? Have they ever taken something to completion? Because if they don't have a track record of doing that, all the way from high school to college, then they're not going to do it with this startup. And also their team. Did they assemble a team of doers? How did they assemble that team? Or did they assemble a team of people who puff themselves up, and then when you need them to do things, don't do things? So the investor has heard all these great ideas, but they're listening for that. They're also listening for some idea that's disruptive, that they haven't heard before, which gets back to something that you and I spoke about before we started, which is, how do you make your idea, your product, your service disruptive? And how do you make it different from what's out there? because people don't remember better than. People remember different than. Because everybody is better than. We do this and such, and we improve such and such. And what's happening is whoever you're talking to, they hear that from everyone who provides a similar service. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. Don't aspire to be better. Aspire to be different. Right,
and different in a positive way, not just being a rebel for the sake of being rebellious. And I'll give you an example. How do you differentiate yourself? When coming up with a title or name for your company, I learned a term from a fellow named Tony Baxter, who was one of the main Imagineers at Disney. And he helped design Disney Paris and Disney Tokyo. And he introduced the term to me, mental real estate. And mental real estate means you want to come up with something that's familiar so you get into people's minds, but then you twist it. So he gave me an example. Pirates of the Caribbean owns the word pirates in the minds of kids. So when kids think of pirates, they think of Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's Disney. So you want to come up with something familiar. A good friend of mine wrote a book that's done well around the world, Never Eat Alone, Keith Ferrazzi. If you think of those three words, never eat alone, that's mental real estate. I wrote a book after my book, Just Listen, called Talking to Crazy, How to Deal with People Who Drive You Crazy. That has mental real estate. People, when I said, I'm writing a book called Talking to Crazy, people would smile. And I'd say, what are you smiling about? They say, I do that every day. and here is the power of mental real estate. So 2 years ago, I spoke in Moscow. I headlined with a Nobel Prize winner named Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. He has a new book out called Noise. And I asked the people in Russia, he's a real deal. I'm just a psychiatrist from California with some books. Why are you having me there? And they said, Doctor, his book did not go viral. And I said, what do you mean? So my book, Talking to Crazy, the Russian edition is How to Talk to A-holes. It went viral across Russia. So when you're coming up with something, you want it to be somewhat familiar, but then grab people.
And I like you said there, the having that common familiarity, and then you can connect it, means that when they see or hear that particular slogan or that visual, they create that association, and that enables that to happen. I mean, on that note, there's a few things that we're going to be talking about today, and we've already touched on a few of them, but we're talking about it now. The book, Talking to Crazy, and crazy in the sense of the book is people that are sort of impossible people, irrational people, that it just feels like you're talking to a brick wall. Now, I can pretty much be sure everyone listening to this at some point in their life has experienced or continues to experience having to have conversations with those irrational people, whether it's their boss, their partner, their children, their teenage children, whoever it might be. What would be some really practical tips for people that can communicate with these people more effectively?
Okay, so I'm going to give you some practical stuff, and thank you if you've listened this long through my long origin story. So here's a practical thing. You take out a piece of paper, you put a line down the piece of paper, and on the left side, you write down all the names of the people that just their name puts a knot in your stomach or your throat. All the people that if you have to face them, you feel you don't want to face them. So these are difficult people. These are people that are difficult to please, easy to upset. On the right side of the piece of paper, write the opposite. People that are easy to please and difficult to upset, because those are the people you need to be grateful and thankful to, and you can't ignore them while you're spending all your time dealing with the people on the left side. So after you've listed all those people, Your mindset needs to be that whenever you're with them, hold a little bit of yourself back, because when you push them to do something they don't want to do, that's when they act up. Or when they come at you trying to push you to do something you don't want to do, that's when they act up. So never expect them not to act up. If you have a conversation that's pleasant, then consider that luxury and good fortune. So you hold a bit of yourself back and always expect them to act up. And then when they act up, and the reason they get to us is because when they act up, they trigger a pattern in our mind where we get frustrated, we get angry. If they keep pushing, we get outraged. And see, when we get outraged, we get tempted to become enraged. So outraged is something we feel inside. Enraged is how we act. But most people are very uncomfortable becoming enraged because you feel off balance, you feel out of control. And so what we do is when they push us from frustration to anger to outrage, we spend a lot of time trying to keep a lid on wanting to smash them because we're uncomfortable with it. And when they see that we're uncomfortable and off balance, that's when they go for it. And sometimes we will appease them just to get out of the conversation. So can you picture that in your mind's eye?
Absolutely, yeah.
And this, by the way, it's not just the yellers. This can be the people who stonewall you. This can be the people who are sullen. This can be the people who, don't say anything. And you're getting so exasperated with them. So here's one of the practical hacks in talking to crazy. It's called the FUD crud. And we called it that because it's easy to remember. And what FUD crud stands for is when you're with that person, they're expecting to provoke you off balance. But instead of going off balance, remember, you've held a little bit of yourself back and they've pulled that behavior that normally provokes you. You wait a couple seconds and you look them straight in the eye, and they're going to get nervous because they were expecting to provoke you and knock you off balance, and you're not off balance. So you look them in the eye, and then after a couple seconds, here's the FUD crud. You say to them, "You sound frustrated, and I think you're holding back." They're gonna go, "What?" "Yeah, you sound frustrated, and I think you're holding back because I think you're also upset and disappointed." That's the FUD. "What?" You sound frustrated about something, and I'm guessing that underneath it, you're also upset and disappointed about that thing. Can you fill me in on all of those things? See if we can make it better." And you go in that order because people are relatively comfortable about talking about what they're frustrated about. Whereas if you say you sound upset, it sounds like you're attacking them. It's like you're saying you sound angry, because I'm not angry. So you want to lead them in to a place where you then allow them to get things off their chest. And it's like cutting through the layers of an onion. So when they say what they're frustrated about, you also want to listen for exaggeration in their words, always, never, or they raise their voice. And after they do that, you stay calm and you say more about the never. Say more about I never, or the company never does such. And so do you follow what I'm saying? You're drawing Absolutely. All that off. And you do that for a while, and then here's how you pivot to the upset. You could say, if I was you, I wouldn't just be frustrated, I'd be upset. So you're saying it that way because, again, you don't want to attack them. I think you're upset. So you're saying, if I was you, I'd be upset too. What might you be upset about? And then you pull that out of them. And then after you do that for a while and you get a sense they're calming down, you could say, I'm guessing you're disappointed too. Disappointed in me, disappointed in the situation, disappointed that we're here again. Fill me in on that. But can you see how that might calm down a situation?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you can use those tactics. And by the way, those tactics are a demonstration of a mental real estate term that I introduced in one of the two books I co-authored during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I co-authored two books with Dr. Diana Hendel. One is called Why Cope When You Can Heal. That has a lot of mental real estate. If you talk to people that are traumatized and you say, I'm writing a book called Why Cope When You Can Heal, women who have been traumatized start to cry. And you say, why are you crying? And they say, if only. If only what? If only I could heal. What do you mean? I'm not the same. I cope. I was traumatized and I cope, but I don't really feel alive. But coping's better than not coping. So that has some mental real estate. And inside Why Cope When You Can Heal, we introduced the term that I use to describe my approach to suicide prevention. And it's called surgical empathy. Surgical empathy. So if you think about that, surgical is a familiar term. Empathy is a familiar term. And when you put them together, people are curious, what the heck is that about? And so when you're using the FUD-CRUD technique, that's an example of surgical empathy. You're going in, you sound frustrated. I'll bet you're upset and I'll bet you're disappointed. And when you go in and you enable them to express what they're upset about, they calm down.
Does that work? Because obviously you sound frustrated is language that would be used if someone's saying something, but sometimes you can tell someone's off, not because they've said something, but because of their actions, i.e. they're not talking, they're slamming doors and they're doing this and that. So could you switch out the word sounds to you seem, so then it's like interchangeable? I know it's a slight nuance, but I'm just thinking of a particular person sort of growing up that I was aware of, that they never really, sometimes they didn't raise their voice and do things, but it was more their actions that made you feel like frosty. You know, they were frosty in their mannerisms and what they were doing, rather than the stuff that they verbally said. And I was just wondering if that could be used in the same way.
Absolutely, and it's a great refinement of it for your viewers and listeners. Because as I said, some people can act sullen or slam doors, so they're not sounding frustrated. But saying you seem frustrated, you appear frustrated. Absolutely. Yeah. Add that as the key opener.
Yeah. Sounds great. So you, as we've already established, working as a psychiatrist and as a business consultant, as a coach, there's been such an array of behaviors that you've come across. And there's been destructive behaviors that people have done. And whether they've been self-sabotaging or sabotaging a business or whatever. But then one of the things that you've also spoken about before is dysfunctional mindsets. And I've worked as a mindset strategist for many, many years now with celebrities, professional athletes, business owners, and a whole array of different people in between. What is it that you would deem is a dysfunctional mindset versus a functional mindset, Mark?
Well, I think you'll agree. Generally, when you're reactive, that's going to be dysfunctional. And the reason it's going to be dysfunctional is because when you're reactive, you basically had your mind hijacked by something in your brain called an amygdala. So you're not thinking clearly. And there's likelihood that since you're not thinking clearly and you're reacting, that it's probably not your best option. Whereas a functional mindset is being able to pause and consider what's happening and then choose a different path. Here's something else that's part of Michelangelo Mindset. So we have a lot of offerings, and if you go to michelangelomindset.com, it's very beta. I mean, it's very early, but there'll be more and more offerings. But something that we offer is something called Prepare for Your Future, and it's PRE, and then capital P, capital A, capital R, capital E. And what does that mean? as you're looking into your future and the future is changing, the pre is accepting that you're going to probably need to change direction, change your mindset, and move in a different direction. Because of the pandemic, if you had a wonderful indoor dining experience and it looks like you're going to have people eat outside and you don't have much sidewalk, you're going to have to do something different. So pre means accepting that what's happening is not just temporary. You're going to have to adjust to it. What the PARE stands for, P stands for pivot. And pivot means you're going to have to change. You're going to have to change the direction you're going. One of the things we talk about is there's a move in professional basketball that was made famous by an NBA player named Manu Ginobili, played for the San Antonio Spurs, and it's called the Euro step. And the Euro step is when you're going towards a defender and you're heading towards the basket to make a layup, they're blocking you. And so what you might do is you might step on your right foot, they lean towards you, and then you pivot to your left foot and you go around them and make the layup. And what's great about the Euro step is you don't lose all your momentum, because if you just hit the brick wall straight on, it would stop you. So by pivoting, what is something that you can do where you don't have to stop entirely, where maybe you can just move a little bit to the left or the right as you pivot? So what is something, what is an asset that you have that might actually fit the current change that you're facing? A stands for alignment. How do you get your mind aligned behind that? Well, that means you're going to have to drop a lot of the stuff you're doing that you probably should have dropped a long time ago anyway, because it's not really generating revenue. It doesn't really have a future, but you kind of like it. And it also means aligning your people. Now the R, so we have prepare. The R is you have to resolve the conflict in your mind to be able to stay focused on that. You can't keep jumping around to, all these different things, because you'll lose credibility and your people will be confused. And you also have to resolve the conflict with your people, because they were moving in one direction and you've now said, we're pivoting. We're no longer making computers. We're going to focus on printing or whatever it is. And then the E is execution. So what's your action going to be? So this is an example of using the Michelangelo mindset. So if you look at the piece of marble as a changing future that's going to continue to change, how do you create an agile, adaptive way of dealing with a future that's always changing? So the David inside that is to follow the prepare acronym. Make sense, kind of?
Yeah. Absolutely makes sense. Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely. In terms of the work that you're doing now. In fact, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Because I was going to comment on it. I'm asking a different question. I want to ask you a question I've never asked anyone on a podcast before. What made you smile today?
Now your listeners don't know about that, do they?
They don't.
Okay. So what he's referring to, he's done his homework. I have a TEDx talk called "What Made You Smile Today," and I gave it pre-COVID, and it was the beginning of a movement. We actually have a hashtag WMYST, which stands for "What Made You Smile Today." I did this TEDx, and just briefly, I told the story of a friend of mine who had a drug addict daughter, and he couldn't stand getting calls from her because she was so manipulative. So he just started texting her every day. Honey, it's Dad. What made you smile today? And at first she started to manipulate him. Oh, I'm going to get money. And he said, no money. We've already done that. What made you smile today? And after a few months, she texts back, knowing that I'd get a text from you. So that was the first time that they connected without her trying to get something out of him. And it was a turning point. Then a couple months later, she was off drugs. So one of the things that we started is we have wristbands, and the wristbands say hashtag WMYST, and we have a website, WMYST.com and .org. And so I think when the masks go away, I will go back to using them. And the way it works is when you're there and you're at a fast food restaurant, or a waiter or waitress is waiting on you, or a cashier at the market, or a TSA agent, many times they have a name tag, but they're not a name. They're not a person to you. They're a function. They're like an appliance, and they feel treated that way by the world. So when you can take a moment, and it's good to do this when they're not really hassled. Like for instance, I'll do this. I did this at a McDonald's, and I could see that there wasn't a rush behind me, and there was Maria. And after she served me, I looked at her name tag and I said, "Thank you, Maria. My name is Mark. I have a question for you." And then she got nervous, and I said, "It's okay. It's okay. You're not in trouble. Maria, what made you smile today?" She paused, she looked up at the ceiling, and she came down and she gave me this huge smile. And she said, "My grandchildren." And then I said, "You have a great smile. Here are 2 wristbands. One is a reminder to use that smile every day. And here's the second wristband. Give it to other people." And here's another special thing. I mentioned I spoke in Russia along with Daniel Kahneman. And one of the things they said is, don't try to make Russians smile. So I have a video clip, because early on in my presentation, I said, before we get started, I have an exercise. I want you to all get up, go over to someone you don't know, and ask them, what made you smile today? And this 1,000 Russians looked at me like I was crazy. I probably was crazy. I said, no, I mean it. I mean it. Go on, get up. And if you see the video, one by one, they get up, and then more get up. And then they start talking, and they start laughing. And then I couldn't get them to stop. I said, come on, sit down. I got to give a presentation here. So I think if it's possible to make 1,000 Russians smile with strangers, if you can do it in Moscow, you can do it everywhere. And so I think we'll continue it. And I want to share something that I think was in my TEDx talk. This is the power of this simple question. I remember someone from India was writing me, and I'm not particularly organized, and I'm just as likely to respond to an email from someone who's jobless or homeless in India and drop the ball on a Fortune 500 CEO. I mean, at this stage of my life, it doesn't matter to me. And so I had an email exchange with Arul in India. And then I sent him an email, and I said, Arul, I have a question for you. What made you smile today? And imagine this, Will. He types back and he says, no one as important as you has ever typed my name.
Wow.
And every day I go to the computer and I touch where you typed my name. That changed his life.
Wow. 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 It's so simple, and it's such a simple question. And that's why I wanted to make sure we spoke about it on the show, because it's such a simple question that anyone can ask to anyone at any time, and it alter the trajectory of their life. And I say alter the trajectory of their life. I mean, I appreciate that's quite a broad sweeping statement, but you never know what someone's going through. And that question, to focus our attention, because we know that the brain is programmed to enable us to survive. So more often than not, is looking for threats. And particularly in the environment that we're in right now, with everything that's gone on in the world the last 18 months, to ask that simple question and to get someone to stop in their day, get present and go, yeah, what was it that made me smile? And they can think of that one thing and get grateful is hugely powerful. But I also think the other thing with it as well, which I know you've spoken about in your work as well, is the power of random acts of kindness. And I've done this work with people before, and people said to me, "But Will, what can I do?" And I've said things like, "You can put £1 on or a dollar in an envelope and stick it on a vending machine, and say the next one's on me and whatever." Or you can see someone's got a parking ticket and give them money. And people go, "Yeah, but they're all things that involve money." What doesn't involve money? Well, holding a door open for someone, giving someone a compliment is always a really powerful one. But just asking them that question, like you said, in the way, what's your name? My name's Will. What's your name? So you're on the same level. I've got a question for you. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. Sort of diffuse it a little bit. What made you smile today? I love it. I absolutely love it.
Well, I'll tell you something that'll make you smile. And if you haven't watched it, smile is going to touch your heart. If you're watching this or listening, do a search for America's Got Talent, Nightbirde, Nightbirde. And you watch the singer, and Simon Cowell is there with some of the other panelists. And she actually, and I think the name of her song was "It's Okay," something like that. And she reveals that she has cancer and it hasn't gone away. And you can see that she's thin, and she sings the song. It touches the whole audience. And then Simon asks her a question about it. And then she said, this gets back to what made you smile today. She delivers this quote. She said, "You shouldn't wait until something hard in your life goes away before you choose to be happy." And she does that, and and you watch Simon Cowell's face, and you know Simon Cowell, his attitude, and everyone says, yes, yes, yes. And then he looks at her and he says, "I'm not going to give you a yes." And then he hits the thing, "I'm going to give you this," and it's a golden ticket. But if you're listening and you're watching, watch that. It will touch you. It will uplift you. But it just shows you the power of what you're saying, that even if we're having a difficult time, even with that father of that drug addict daughter, he figured she's got to smile about something. Maybe she took a shower. Maybe she had a slice of pizza. I don't know what it is. But inside everything, every day, there's something that's capable of making us smile. And I think just asking it, I think it could be a great movement. Would love to promote that.
I agree. And yeah, I think the people that are listening to this, I hope that, in fact, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge the people that are listening to this right now, whatever day you're listening to this, I don't care what 24-hour section you're in, make it your commitment to ask someone the question every day for the next 7 days minimum. Every day for the next 7 day minimum. And notice the feeling, because you know what I'm talking about, Mark. When people ask this question, sure, you're asking it for someone else, but if you do it every day for the next 7 days, notice how it makes you feel by just asking the question. That's the whole thing with the random act of kindness. You think, well, by making someone else feel good by doing the random act of kindness, you're going to think that it's them you're making feel good. But the fact that you've done that act, and you've not got to tell the world about it, it can be done in private. The feeling that it gives you is incredible too.
And I think it's important also, don't select someone who's in the middle of a tantrum. I mean, don't set yourself up to fail. Say it to someone who you believe feels invisible in the world, who doesn't feel like a human being or a person. They feel like a function. So I think doing it with them is really helpful. I'll share something that when I used to be in practice as a practicing psychiatrist, one of the things I would do with depressed patients, because some of my depressed patients, when I would drill down with surgical empathy, like what's really going on, more than a few of them would say, "I don't think I deserve to be happy because I am totally self-involved. Maybe I don't deserve to be happy because all I care about is myself." And so my assignment to them is I would have a box of these healthy snacks in little bags. And I'd say, every day, I want you to have a bunch of these in your pocket, and when you pass homeless people, go over to them, and you may be hesitant to give them money because you don't want them to buy drugs or alcohol, but go over to them. And you might even say, you might not want to say what made you smile today, because that might be a little insensitive, but go over to them and say, hi, my name's Mark. What's your name? And they're going to look a little weird at you, huh? And they'll tell you it sheepishly. And then you look at them, and then you say, and you take out one of the healthy snacks and say, you look like you're kind of hungry. I hope this helps. And I had my depressed patients, I said, I want you to do it every day until our next appointment. And everyone that came back of those patients, many of them, I said, how did it go? And they would mutter, I feel better. because it helped them to feel less self-absorbed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, I've got another powerful question to ask. What do you believe, out of all of the work that you've done, 25 years as a professor, you've worked with in some really hostile situations and challenging situations with your career in sort of a hostage negotiator and FBI and all those kinds of things. What do you believe is the secret to peace of mind?
Well, you've read up on me, Will. You've done your homework. I think one of the secrets to peace of mind is forgiveness. I remember in some of my presentations, when I used to do live presentations, I could still do this on Zoom. I would occasionally say, if I could give you in one word the secret to peace of mind, if you agreed with it, would you be willing to put it into action? And if you don't agree with it, you don't have to. And so there I would be in front of this audience, and I would take out a little piece of paper, and I already gave you the word, but I'd write the word forgiveness on a piece of paper, and I'd give it to the person in the front row to my left. And one by one, people would open the piece of paper, look at it, expecting riches, money, love. And when they saw it, it was like watching dominoes fall down. They look at it and they go, oh, and then they'd pass it to the person next to them. And I have a favorite quote about forgiveness. It comes from a friend of mine, Dr. Shawnee Duperon. And she has a program, I think it's called Project Forgive. And she said, forgiveness is accepting the apology you will never receive. Forgiveness is accepting the apology you will never receive. And when she shared that with me, it really blew me away. And I actually applied it to my father, who had died in 95, 26 years ago, because he could be at times very critical. And I think he worked hard, and I think he was critical probably because, he felt the pressure of wanting to earn a living and support a family. But I remember one of the things that he would say was, if I came up with a new idea, he'd say, what makes you think you know anything about anything? And my father was good with numbers. He was an accountant. And I think stuff outside of numbers were a little bit intimidating for him because, he was good with numbers. And, but I took that as a criticism. I mean, that's a put down. What makes you think you know anything about anything? So after I heard that quote, forgiveness is accepting the apology you will never receive, I imagine my father saying to me, who's been gone 26 years, when I used to say that to you, what makes you think you know anything about anything? It's because you were very creative and you brought up things that I knew nothing about, and it made me feel nervous. And I wish I'd sent you to the neighbor's dad who might have known about it, but I didn't. Instead, because I felt nervous that what I knew wasn't good enough, I said that to you. And I'm so amazed at what you've done with your life. I mean, what you have done with your life is so beyond what I could have imagined. And I wish I was alive today to tell you how sorry I was and how proud I am of you. And as I imagined him saying that to me, I started to tear up. And I apologized to him. And I said, I'm sorry I held a grudge against you. I should have known that the reason you said that is because it made you nervous. I mean, I'm a psychiatrist, doctor, heal thyself. I should have known that, and I didn't. And I apologized to him. I'm sorry that I held that and other things against you, so we weren't as close as we could have been.
Powerful. Very, very powerful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think forgiveness, there's a lot of people that will be listening to this right now, that view of forgiving. And a lot of people say, well, just forgive them, just and sort of discount it, but explaining it in the way that you have, in the way that you did it personally, I think it's gonna help a lot of people. So thank you very much for that, Mark.
So let me ask you, Will, let me turn the table. Think of someone that you would like to forgive, and living or dead, and there is an apology that might help, but you'll never get it, especially if they're dead, but you may never get it from them, even if they're alive.
So I do a lot of work around balance and when I have what I would call an imbalance, like an emotional charge on something or someone, I work really hard to balance that, and I do a process. So the reason I'm pausing is that I'm trying to think of the people that in the past I would have wanted forgiveness from. I've sort of done the work around it. There's no one that springs to mind first of all that I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, that's fine. That's a good advertisement, by the way, for your program.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, I mean, someone once said to me, there's a difference, Will, between forgiving and forgetting. And if you take the word forget and look at the suffix, it's get. And if you take the word forgive and look at the suffix, it's give. If you forget something, you get it. You've got it. You can suppress it down, but you've still got it. When you forgive, you're giving something up. And that really stuck with me. That was many years ago that I first heard that. But then the process of the way that I kind of create these balances. So it's a cognitive process that you go through to create a balance that then impacts you at an emotional level, opens up your heart, and then you can kind of be at equilibrium. Has definitely elements of what you've just spoken about, which I think's really really powerful. But it is just having that. I think the key that you shared there as well is when you then flipped it and said, well, I actually forgive you because of what I've done. We all see the world from our own perspective, and then when we can get in the other person's perspective and see it from that place, then when you change your perspective, your whole world can change, right? That's kind of how I see it.
Absolutely. There was another nuance to the forgiving that I learned is when I did the exercise with audiences, and the single word was forgiveness. It wasn't forgiving, it was forgiveness. And I asked people in the audience, I said, raise your hand if when you think of the word forgiveness, it's about you're needing to forgive another person. Or raise your hand when you think of the word forgiveness, you think about you need to ask forgiveness from another person. And I said, look, I'm not here to out you, but if you're someone who needs to forgive other people, you're not as good relationship material as the latter. If you're someone who thinks I have to ask forgiveness, if that's where you went to, there's a good chance that you have closer relationships. Because if your first thought was you're being hurtful to others and wanting to make it better, that may be a more positive ability than someone's been hurtful to you and you're angry at them and you need to let the anger go.
Yeah.
Very subtle.
Yeah, important for sure. Well, Mark, look, I've loved this conversation. I know we could speak all afternoon about the sort of surgical empathy and your work, and we'll definitely get you back on the show as another guest to continue the conversation in the not too distant future. We've spoken about a few of your books. We've spoken about Talking to Crazy. We've spoken about Just Listen and the elements of that with surgical empathy. There's 9 books in total that you've written. But if people have been listening to this and thinking, wow, this is incredible, where can I go and find out more about Mark and his work? How can people connect with you?
Well, if you do a search under my name at Google, you'll get exhausted all the different directions. So I do have a personal website, markgoulston.com. I have a website, michelangelomindset.com. My LinkedIn profile is pretty up to date. I have an audio course on Himalaya Learning that does audio courses. They have people like Seth Godin and Tim Ferriss. And I have a course called Defeating Self-Defeat, because my first book was Get Out of Your Own Way. And that was an international bestseller. And that's an audio course. And if you go to himalaya.com/defeat, and if you put in the word defeat, I think all capital letters in the promo code, you can hear it. And I'll give you a teaser, because so one of the, I think there's 13 small episodes, audio episodes, but one of them I talk about is procrastination. And this might be a good thing to end on. One of the things I talk about in the audio course is we procrastinate not because we're lazy and disorganized. We procrastinate because we're lonely. And my proof of that is that often we will put off doing things that we won't put off if we're doing it with someone. Think of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have sponsors. Think of being in college and your dormitory is just a pigsty, and you'll clean it up when you're all doing it. And I remember one anecdote where I was on with a radio host, and I said, "What is something you're procrastinating about?" And she said, "Everyone says I should write a book. I've had a lot of life experiences, but I've been putting it off." And one of the reasons we put it off because we're lonely is that often we're just beating up on ourselves, and it reminds us of being lonely as children, and we were trapped as children. But when we get older, we say, "I'm not going to do anything I don't want to do that's painful." So I said to her, I said, "Here's the deal. When would be the best time for you to write for a half an hour?" And she said, 7 a.m. Now, she was 3 hours later than me. I said, "Here's the deal." I said this on a radio show. "I'm going to call you every day at 7 a.m. your time, 4 a.m. my time. And you're going to get out, and I'm going to say, get to your computer, get in front of it, boot it up. And then I'm going to ask you the same question. What do you want to write about right now?" And you'll say, "I'd like to write about whatever it is." And then you're going to write for half an hour. I'm going to do that every day. And so what happened is I did that. And she told her audience, "That crazy psychiatrist, he's getting up at 4 a.m. And I said, "I'm not taking any excuses. I'm up at 4. I'm probably not getting back to sleep. You're going to do this." So we did that for a month. And then 6 months later, she called me and she said, "What's your address? I want to send you the book."
Wow.
So can you see how doing something with someone can often push us to do things that we normally procrastinate about? So that's one of the lessons in Defeating Self-Defeat at Himalaya.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And what we'll do, Mark, we'll put for everyone listening, we're going to put the links to those websites that Mark's just mentioned into the show notes, so you can go and head there now and check them out. That's amazing. Mark, thank you so much for being a guest. I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been extremely insightful and sharing your wisdom. And I encourage people listening to go and check out the resources that Mark just mentioned. Definitely go and check out the books. There's an array of them that you can get access to, I'm sure, on all the usual sort of book outlets that people can get access to. So yeah, Mark, thanks again.
Thank you. And one thing I did forget, I have a podcast and we'll have you on as a guest. It's called My Wake Up Call, where I talk to people. I can't wait to open you up, Will. We talk to people. What's your purpose? What's your calling? And what's the wake up calls that led there? And I've had people like Larry King, Jordan Peterson. So you'd be amongst people that you'd be proud to be amongst, Will.
Well, I'll look forward to that for sure. Thank you very much. Mark, again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And for everyone listening, until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.